move forward. I'm Paul Ganster. I want to welcome you to this meeting of COBRO. And before we move on, let me note that simultaneous interpretation is available. And I would like to ask our interpreter, Diana Orozco, to briefly explain how this feature works. If possible, provide the information in the chat. So,
Announcement from interpreter.
Okay.
Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. And since we're in a hybrid format, I'd like to review the process and guidelines for participating in Zoom. For COBRO members who are on Zoom, if you'd like to speak, please turn on your camera or raise your hand by opening your participants panel on the Zoom toolbar and clicking raise hand at the bottom. Once you are seen by me or the staff, you'll be recognized at that time. In addition, please note that you are not automatically muted by the meeting organizer, so you will have to mute and unmute yourself. For public members who would like to speak on an item during the time set aside for that, please use the raise hand icon. And when you're called, you'll be unmuted by SANDAG staff. If you call in by phone and would like to comment on an item, please press *9 on your phone. To unmute yourself, you may need to enter *6 to unmute yourself. After your comments, you will be muted by SANDAG staff. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be part of today's meeting record. Are there any questions about that process? Well, moving on to our first item, I wanted to welcome everyone and invite all participants to introduce themselves. But first, I'd like to welcome our longtime friend and new SANDAG CEO, Mario Orso, who has participated in many COBRO meetings over the years. As CEO of SANDAG, Mario brings a wealth of knowledge and passion in leading the agency to deliver more than 200 projects across the San Diego region that improve mobility, equity, safety, and the regional economy. He oversees the $1.2 billion annual budget, implements policies set by the board of directors, and leads a staff of more than 400 professionals who plan, implement, and build regional solutions. With more than 30 years of transportation planning experience, Mario is dedicated to successfully building teams, delivering major infrastructure projects, and bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars to serve the San Diego region. Prior to joining SANDAG in 2024, Mario held several important leadership positions with Caltrans District 11 in San Diego and Imperial Counties, and as Chief Deputy Director, Corridor Project Director for South County and Trade Corridors. He was the district's first Native American liaison and involved with the Intergovernmental Review Branch as chief. In 2023, he was appointed acting Caltrans District 12 Director in Orange County. So he really has tremendous experience and very, very significant involvement in border transportation planning, which is even more complex than transportation planning within the United States. He has a civil engineering degree from San Diego State, a certificate in project management from Sac State, and is a licensed professional engineer in the state of California. So Mario, would you like to say a few words about your border priorities and what your priorities are for COBRO, among other things?
Well, I thank you and welcome all. I really wanted to be here, and I made a point to make sure that the calendar was totally clear for today's meeting. I think there's so many issues in the region that we need to discuss, and SANDAG is the table where we discuss tough issues and challenges and wins. And COBRO is one of those groups that is a great advisor to us and provides that forum to discuss border infrastructure. I really want to invite COBRO to, in future meetings, to have a discussion of ideas of how you can help more and assist us in enhancing the border conversation, the planning efforts. But I think beyond the planning efforts, developing those documents or those ideas that will give us the map for success and to implement items that we need at the border. Let it be transportation, let it be the environment, let it be whatever common things we have going on between us. So I really want to again stress that COBRO is very important to us. We know that COBRO needs to be, like everything else, rethink itself for the 21st century. And I think that one of those great deals of opportunities would be having that discussion of how you would be advising us on improving our border coordination in this organization. Let it be via the Borders Committee or whatever. But I really want you to be that spearhead of that those ideas are coming from this binational group. So that's that. If somebody, this is as far as I've gone. I'm providing a goal or ideas. You know, I've been really assessing the organization, but you know, I would be lying to not say that this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. So that's why I wanted to make the point to be the first meeting that I came for the full amount of time. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Mario. And we certainly welcome your challenge, and you will be hearing from us, and we'll try to bring meaningful and practical ideas to move up the chain of command within the organization. It's clear, I think, to all of us who are involved in the border on a day-to-day basis that the complexity and the cross-border linkages are only increasing, the problems are increasing, and the challenges are increasing, and we need to be prepared to address those as we can from our position here within SANDAG.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks again for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, let's move on to self-introductions. I think we have time now. If you just take a minute and tell us who you are, if you represent a group, we'd like to hear that. It's been a while since we've been meeting face to face, so it'll take a while to become reacquainted. So, and please turn on your microphone when you speak and speak loudly so I can hear you. Otherwise, it'll just be white noise for me. So I'd really like to hear you. So let's start over here and go around the table.
morning. My name is Naomi Young. I'm a principal economist here at SANDAG.
Hello, Andrea Hoff. I'm a senior project manager here at SANDAG.
Good morning, Nathan Owens, UC San Diego Division of Extended Studies.
Good morning, Alejandra Meritaran with the Otay Mesa Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning, Betsy Blake, Senior Legal Counsel at SANDAG.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Wapner. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at SANDAG.
And I'm Mario Orson, the CEO for SANDAG.
Paul Ganster, I've already introduced myself.
Mariela Rodriguez, Senior Regional Planner at SANDAG.
Good morning, Hannah Stern, Manager of Government Relations at SANDAG.
Hector Vanegas, Borders Program Manager here in SANDAG.
Hello, this is Jose Marquez with Caltrans.
Good morning, Joaquin Lucan, Executive Director, Smart Border Coalition. Bienvenido, Mario.
Evan Funk, Regional Planning Intern at SANDAG.
A special welcome to Evan because he's going to be doing all the work that we create.
Elizabeth Hensichini, Alianza por la Movilidad Activa, Asociación Civil.
Tomás Pérez Vargas, del Consejo de Desarrollo de Tijuana.
Daniel Gómez Patiño, Alianza por la Movilidad Activa, Asociación Civil.
And my name is Santiago. I'm here as a guest with Elizabeth and Daniel as well.
Well, thank you. And I think we have some folks online who would like to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Fausto Castillo. I'm the Chief of Linkage from Implan.
Welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Karen Igareda, Director of Public Relations and Government Affairs at Cross Border Express.
Glad to have you with us.
Hello, everyone. This is Claudia Basurto from Tijuana Innovadora. And welcome, Mario Orso, for congratulations for your new appointment. And good morning, everyone.
Hi, Claudia. Thanks for joining today.
Hello, everyone. Miriam Mendoza with the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Morning.
Good morning. Hello, Tyler Foltz, City Manager, City of Imperial Beach.
Hello there. I think that's it. So thanks for everyone who could join in person or online. And let's move forward with item 2 on our agenda, a consent item. And this is a report prepared by Hector Vanegas on the recent Mexican elections celebrated on June 2nd, 2024. The report can be accessed through the link included in today's meeting agenda. Hector?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, the report that was included in your agenda states that after 200 years of elections in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum is the virtual president-elect of Mexico and becoming the first woman president of the country. Along with the election of the president, the country also held elections of the Congress, both houses, the Diputados and Senate, and it is looking that the ruling party is getting the majority of the Congress and both chambers. And there were also elections in 9 states. 7 of those were also won by the ruling party. So this was an overwhelming message by the voters that they want to have continuity of the current administration. And the inauguration of the new Congress is on the first day of September, and the inauguration of the new president of Mexico is on the first day of October. Also, our friends south of the border elected mayors and the local legislature for Baja California. And the new mayor of Tijuana, and now he's a mayor-elect, is Mr. Ismael Burgueño, and he's taking office also on the first day of October. That's my report, and I can answer if you have questions.
Lots of change. Thanks. Does anyone have questions for Hector? So just a question. The outgoing president, AMLO, will not have full control of both houses during his term.
Current president of Mexico, well, obviously these are separate powers, but the ruling party has control of both, but not supermajority, if that's what you mean. So they can make a lot of changes and pass legislation, but not amendments to the Constitution as it is currently.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it's going to be fascinating to watch, and some colleagues and I have been looking up the new Mexican president to be on various academic databases, and she's been a very serious scholar and has published some major works with other colleagues on climate change and energy, the transition to renewables. So it'll be interesting to see if that perspective continues, because that certainly is important for the border region because of our energy relations and other issues.
And if I just can add, the virtual president-elect, Claudia Sheinbaum, is also appointing those that are going to be part of her cabinet. And she already announced Juan Manuel de la Fuente, who was the former Mexican ambassador to the United Nations, as the new Secretary of Foreign Relations, and also to Jesus Esteva, the former Director of Public Works of the city of Mexico City, as the new Secretary of Infrastructure and Communication and Transportation of Mexico.
Terrific. Other comments or questions? Thanks very much, Hector. Okay, moving on to item 3 on your agenda packet. Today we have 2 presentations. The first is a result of a study conducted to understand the economic value of Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. Naomi Young and Dr. Andrea Hoff will present this item.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Hello to members of COBRO. Again, my name is Andrea Hoff. I'm a senior project manager here at SANDAG in the Department of Engineering and Construction. I work mostly on Otay Mesa East Port of Entry, State Route 11 Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project, as well as other freight projects. Really excited to be here. I have with me Naomi Young, our senior economist, and she'll be doing most of the presentation. I'll just be introducing this exciting topic. We have been looking at the economic value of the corridor project, State Route 11, Otay Mesa East. You may recall, if you've been around for any number of years, we often come up with statistics that illustrate the important benefits that we think this project will bring to the region, to the state, and to both countries. And this is a recent update of one of those studies. I'll start off by providing an overview of the project, just to remind folks of what this corridor project consists of and a status of where we are with design and construction on both sides of the border. And then I'll turn it over to Naomi to dive into study results. So the State Route 11 Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project is illustrated here on your slide. It consists of about 2.5 miles of a new freeway, State Route 11, as well as connectors to the 125, the 905. You can see everything in dark blue has been constructed already and open to traffic, with the exception of the portion of State Route 11 just past Enrico Fermi leading to the new port of entry, which you see there in pink and green stripes. We were excited to recently receive authorization from GSA, General Services Administration, and Customs and Border Protection, the 2 federal agencies that really typically do ports of entry and operate them, to proceed past a 30% design point. We'd completed 30% design, and now we're authorized to go to full design as well as release a solicitation for our construction contractor. We'll be using a method called Construction Manager General Contractor, or CMGC. That MOU was signed last week. It was exciting. And then shortly thereafter, our board of directors was able to approve release of that solicitation. So we are in full design mode at this point. I'll point out that it consists of the striped area you see on the slide is the federal port of entry, as well as the state owned and highway patrol run commercial vehicle enforcement facility. It's like the truck weigh station. And then south of the border, you'll see in orange, Mesa de Otay, which is the Mexican counterpart facility. And they're currently under construction, both on their port as well as their access road, Boulevard de los Torres, and are anticipated to wrap up construction this year. It's been quite impressive to see the progress that they've made. I'd like to point out one unique aspect about this project. There are many, but one in particular, particularly interesting for the border community, is that this project, unlike other ports of entry that have experienced such demand and have had to use local streets and roads to accommodate that demand, in this case, this was really visioning for the future. And so the transportation infrastructure that you see that has already been built is planned for the future and adequately sized to serve the port of the future. And on both sides of the border, we're going to have that dedicated access road. Another key thing I'll point out, if folks don't already know, the project will be a toll project, which uses congestion pricing, or a toll that's based on the demand. So the toll will go up when the line is very long, when wait times are very long, and it will go down when there's less demand. And that will enable our goal of maintaining a 20 to 30 minute wait time at the new port of entry. So not only would this be an expedited crossing, but also we anticipate reductions in the other ports of entry because we're really trying to provide a relief valve for the overconstrained infrastructure. A couple of benefits. We're here to talk about economic benefits, but I'll just point out briefly that we anticipate improved air quality in the border region due to the reduction in idling, improvements in border security, providing another port of entry for folks to use. We'll also have non-intrusive inspection equipment, which is advanced technology used to screen vehicles. Customs and Border Protection would like to screen 100% of vehicles using that. In addition to traveler information and a whole host of other benefits. But with that, I will turn the presentation over to Naomi, who has been leading up our recent update on the economic value of Otay Mesa East, and take it away. Thank you.
Great. Bear with me, I always struggle a little bit with clickers. So I'd like to start with just saying that what we did is to understand the value of Otay Mesa East is we really wanted to look at how does it fit into the various land ports of entry all along the US-Mexico border, because that's really what's going to tell us about what the forecasted growth is and how well it'll play, how much it'll play a role in the US economy and meeting demand that's forecasted over time. So to do that, we'll start with really understanding, I want to zoom out and talk about land ports of entry in the US. To give that a context for highlighting where imports can actually enter the US by truck, and then also how the truck crossings have grown over time. So last year, there were 99 land ports of entry in the US for which trucks could bring imports in. And this map shows you where those land ports of entry were located. The size of the circle represents the relative amount of trucks that came through. There's a couple of things that should really jump out in just orienting you. And so the first thing is that there are a lot more ports of entry along the US-Canadian border. This makes sense because there's just so many more miles. But along the US-Mexico border, out of those 99, there are only 22. And at the same time, despite there being only 1/5 of land ports of entry where imports could be trucked into the US, they actually handled almost half of all US imports by truck. And then if you focus a little bit more along the land ports of entry on the US-Mexico border, then what you also see is that there are 6 land ports of entry that account for nearly 87% of those volumes. So what that means is that our land ports of entry along the US-Mexico border are incredibly busy, much busier than the Canadian one. The last thing I just want to highlight in looking at this orientation is that what you can also see is that there are really only 2 land ports of entry where trucks bring in goods that also have access to the coast. And so we're home to one of them, and then the other one is along the Gulf is Brownsville. Now, one of the things that I want to emphasize is that we're looking at land ports of entry and truck freight. And I think this is important because typically when we think about ports of entry and we compare value, what we don't do is think about how goods can come into the US with multiple modes. So it could be piped, it could be rail, air, and then containers, seaport containers. And so we were trying to control for the fact that like Otay Mesa East as an additional land port of entry is not competing against pipes or the value of piped goods coming in. So if you look at Brownsville, where we're saying it does have access to a seaport, one of the things to note is that the closest seaport is also really focused on hydrocarbons. So, you know, and if they were to think about bringing in access to other seaports along the Gulf, those ports are farther away than we are to Long Beach or the Port of Los Angeles or Ensenada. So again, in terms of competition and thinking about access multimodal to seaports and global trade, we really don't have a lot of competitors. Okay. So the next thing that I want to highlight is that when we think about land ports of entry and truck volumes, that along the US-Mexico border, it's been increasing dramatically. So prior to the Great Recession, it was fairly stable. I mean, we were seeing seeing our 2 greatest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, kind of like, you know, toe-to-toe in the amount of volume imports. But then after the Great Recession, the amount of truck volume really accelerated. And so you can see that prior to the Great Recession, every year on average, we're having about 52,000 more trucks per year. Now, after the Great Recession, we're looking at about 4 times that, so about 188,000 trucks every year coming through those port of entries. Remember also that out of those 22 land ports of entry, only 6 of them handle 87% of those truck volumes. So this growth is really significant and largely felt in those busiest land ports of entry. And those are the ones that we're going to concentrate on. And then you can see after COVID that truck volume growth continues to accelerate. And so why I bring this up is because this points to the fact that even if we meet current demands and the congestion we're feeling, there's still going to be continued longer growth and pressure. There's the nearshoring trends that we've seen post-COVID are going to fuel this quite a bit, along with some of the infrastructure investments that we're reading about in Mexico. Okay. Ooh, that was a pointer, sorry. Okay. So I've just given you a little bit of context to think about how San Diego's land ports of entry fit into just port of entries in the US in general. Just want to highlight a couple of things that really make our region unique in their assets. And so first and foremost, we all know this, but the bidirectional flow of goods and people through the ports of entry in San Diego are quite significant. It's one that really differentiates our region. And then second, we've all heard about this, but the value of the goods and the skills that come across our borders are quite significant and outsized and unique from the other land ports of entry. Our ports of entry, which include air, sea, land, and rail, are also complementary to each other. And then lastly, I mean, we really are quite a busy area with San Ysidro having the most pedestrian and personal vehicle border crossings with about just 15 million cars per year. The second busiest, which would be Laredo, doesn't even come close. And then lastly, in terms of truck movements, Otay Mesa is the second largest land port of entry for trucks from Mexico, with over 1 million trucks crossing northbound last year. In a national context, we're ranked 3rd. So first is Laredo, second would be, I believe, Detroit. and they're not much bigger in terms of truck volumes than Otay Mesa. So again, there's this outsized presence in terms of the significance of truck imports to the US. So I also want to highlight that the goods that are moving through San Diego's ports of entry, and this is all of them collectively, are important to supply chains that are linking the movement of goods globally, domestically, and locally to US markets. And so one stat there where you can see that is that the imports from Asia and the rest of Latin America have increased from 5% to 14% of all imports coming through. So we're increasingly playing a bigger role in global connections. The next is that even within the US, in terms of connecting to domestic markets, Otay Mesa has a big presence. So California continues to be our key market, which doesn't, I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise because California is just a big economy in general. But the second thing is that we're also seeing that imports destined to markets outside of California are growing over time. And so you can see that through, for example, in medical devices, we're about 1/3 of the imports that are going to Massachusetts. So our presence, our significance to markets all across the US, even moving to the East Coast, is quite notable. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about where we fit in terms of US land ports of entry, highlighted some of the assets and the strengths of San Diego's ports of entries. And then what I really want to do is dig in more about how we fit along the US-Mexico border. And to do that, we focused on, as I mentioned, 6 city pairs along the border that all have land ports of entry. And then this highlights where those are. So most of these are in Texas and California. Oops, let me just catch up to my notes. One
Naomi,
moment. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Or kind of planting the seed.
Mhm.
So you were talking medical devices, high tech stuff. How you know, like having a joint discussion, let's say, with all the regional airport authorities from Southern California, let it be from the Ontario Airport, LAX, the Lindbergh, the Tijuana Airport, and on, right? It's just an example that could lead to a conversation of how to position the region in not in a better connectivity way, not just a cross-border connectivity, but how do we project ourselves as a real mega region, right? Would those type of forums, discussion, help in promoting, bringing the value of the region?
Yeah, I'm going to highlight 4 things that really differentiate our region and I think put us on the map when we start talking about this, which hopefully will reinforce some of the seeds you're planting. So just to highlight, and then I'll hit on it. Actually, let me just start with it. So there's 4 things that really differentiate our region when we look at other land ports of entry. The first is economic integration with Tijuana. We can see that not only in terms of imports and exports moving across our border, but also in the significance of the manufacturing sector, in particular subsectors in both economies. And when I talk about economic integration, what I'm really talking about is that production systems and economic activity are so knitted together that it's hard to disentangle. They're intimately reliant upon each other. The second is that Otay Mesa East, and Otay Mesa, and I'm going to focus on that because it's just so significant in terms of truck volumes, is that the value of those commodities moving across our border are incredibly high. They differentiate themselves from the other land ports of entry. The growth has outpaced most of the other land ports of entry along the US-Mexico border. That's really notable considering how much truck volumes across the US-Mexico border have increased over time. You saw that like post-Great Recession, it's increased by about 4 times. It's now adding about 200,000 trucks per year across all of our US-Mexico borders. And then lastly, that San Diego is one of the only land ports of entry with multimodal access, including 4 major seaports. And I emphasize the seaports, and we can start thinking about air as well, just because of how important it is in terms of global connectivity. And we all learned that lesson through COVID. So let me dig into each of those for a little bit. So the first thing is that the way that we can see economic integration between San Diego and Tijuana is just in the manufacturing sector alone. So this is looking at GDP for manufacturing. Sorry, let me back up. So each of our 6 border city pairs, we looked at GDP activity and the industry sectors and manufacturing in particular. And so what we're using here is county to Mexican municipality. And then there's multiple LPOs and LPOEs in each of those. And so what you can see is San Diego is 2.5 times bigger than the next biggest border city pair. And then interestingly enough, Web Nuevo Laredo is where we have Laredo, which is the busiest land port of entry. And notice that it also has the smallest GDP associated with manufacturing. So what that suggests is that that area is really geared, its economy is about freight moving through it, as opposed to when we look at San Diego, Tijuana, our economies and our LPOE is about the movement of inputs and products back and forth, and then going to markets in the US. Okay. So the next thing is, this is a really busy table, and I'm not expecting you to take the table in, but let me just walk you through a couple of things that are really important. So we looked at the 10 commodities that are exported and imported through Otay Mesa. And the top 10 in each of those. And what you have listed here are 18 of those. And so what that means is that there's high concurrence between the two. So out of those top exports and imports, first off, they fit into 3 broad categories: electronics, vehicles and transportation equipment, and medical. So that's the first piece that shows the high integration. The second, it also speaks to the high value. So we're talking about durable manufactured goods, oftentimes with advanced manufacturing practices, and products that go all over the US. The second thing is you can see the integration also when you look at, for these commodities, if you look at the exports and the imports columns, what you see are values in most of those. That's what I'm talking about, where you see inputs coming, you see movement from the north to the south, so from San Diego to Tijuana, and then from Tijuana back to the US markets in these categories. And so that's a second point that talks to the integration, the economic integration in the manufacturing systems that exist. Okay.
So can you say it in a different way, because I couldn't follow you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me try this. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at what we are exporting to Tijuana.
Yes.
And let's just take let's look at the electronics. So what you can see is that we're exporting commodities that fall within televisions, video monitors, projectors, the first one, right? So we're exporting parts that go to that. And then what we're doing is we're importing finished products back into the US. And so the fact that we have exports and imports in the same commodities is the way that we can think about how we have integrated manufacturing systems. And if we have integrated manufacturing systems, we're having integrated economic activity, because again, manufacturing is one of the largest sectors on both sides for San Diego and for Tijuana. Did that help? Okay, so thank you for reminding me about that. So the third column is looking at how much of those goods or commodities are imported to the US, what share Otay Mesa has of those. So now we're only looking at the 7 land ports of entry along the US-Mexico border that account for 87% of all imports to the US by truck. Okay, so think you have a big pie. Now we just took out 10%, and now we're looking at that last 90, well, not that 90%, and we're looking at how it's distributed in terms of what comes into the US across 7 land ports of entry. Yes.
And those are the 7 land ports of entry that
they're listed, yes.
Okay.
73% of all televisions, video, and monitor projectors were imported through Otra Mesa.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
Can I ask
Success,
something?
I explained
Can I
it.
ask something, Naomi, or a comment? It's really interesting to see. I hope you can share this because you kind of start looking at the companies, televisions, Foxconn and
Yep.
and the phone sets, Poly, and
Yep.
but on the turbojets, I notice you have 0 on imports, and that to me is solar turbines. But I'm wondering why it says 0 imports. It must be under a different classification number because it's transformed. Because it should be significant, the 0.
Yeah, I apologize. The 0 is a typo.
Oh,
It should, I know, and it's a really bad typo. I'm sorry. It should be blank. And what blank means is not that we don't import anything. It's just that it wasn't in our top 10.
oh, I see.
Yes. So thank you for catching that and having me call out a mistake. But yeah, so that's what it means. Yeah, I apologize for that. That's actually a really big mistake. Okay, so I think we're all oriented to what this table is saying. So I think that the numbers aren't as important as just really seeing the concentration of our top 10 exports and imports in 3 high value categories. And that you can see that for those individual commodities, that there is exports and imports that are highly ranked. So it's speaking to the integration. And then lastly, that last column with the percentages just shows that the outsized role Otay Mesa plays in these goods moving from Mexico to the US. Okay. So I've talked about economic integration. I've also touched on the things that are pointing to the value of our land ports of entry. So the next one is to just think about growth. And so what we're seeing early indications of from our analyses is that without OME, it's very difficult for the U.S. to receive all of the forecasted imports that's out there. And we can see that because when we're looking at how northbound trucks have grown over the last 20 years, you can see the strong growth in each of these land ports of entry. I want to highlight just a couple of things. One is that if you look at San Diego, so from 2000 to 2023, we're averaging about 15,000 more trucks each year headed north. And that's equivalent to all of the other land POEs outside of our 6. So the ability for goods to move to other land ports of entry, if they're trying to avoid the bottleneck in our region, will be challenged. The other thing that I want to highlight is that in 2022, the number of the imports by truck that were coming in had already reached the forecasted levels for 2032. According to the FAF5 forecast.
Is that
So,
for San Diego or for all of them?
no, this is just for Otay Mesa.
Oh, for Otay Mesa.
Yep. Yes.
My question is, 2020 was the year of the pandemic.
Yep.
Would it be very different if you compare to 2019 before the pandemic?
Yeah, it's going to be the same story, mostly because I'm going to back up for a minute and going to go all the way to the very beginning. So when you look at this chart, this is all trucks entering the US from Canada and Mexico. But again, this acceleration is largely because of trucks entering from Mexico. The other thing that's kind of I didn't mention it, but to highlight why this will continue to grow is that when you look at our 3 largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, China, post-pandemic, well, first off, around 2015, Mexico overtook Canada as our largest trading partner. The second thing is that, and then the second thing, well, it was our second largest, but it overtook Canada. And then the second thing is post-COVID, what we've seen is that the imports from China have actually decreased. And, there's some question about whether or not that trend will continue. It's likely because of the level of investments that we're seeing in terms of how manufacturers, producers have found new shipping routes to the US. Did that answer your question, Hector? Okay. So the last piece of one of the reasons why we consider San Diego well-positioned in Otay Mesa East to likely be an important part of the continued flow of goods to the US is when we look at the multimodal access. And so this table just shows you of the 6 border city pairs, the number of land ports of entry and then what their access is to distribution networks. And so a lot of words. The main thing to really focus on is that San Diego Tijuana is the only one in here that has, well, and Calexico, Mexicali, has access to seaports. And that what we're seeing is increased investment in Ensenada to expand its capacity as well. The other piece is that you can think about these other land ports of entry. I mean, their main connection will be through rail. And so the timeliness of expanding rail networks is also questioned. So, okay. So really the key things that we want to emphasize is that when we look at the land ports of entry, particularly for San Diego region and the potential role that Otay Mesa East will play in that, what we're seeing is that we stand out as a region and we stand out for along 4 dimensions. The first is the economic integration with Tijuana. The second is the value of the commodities that are moving both north and south through our land ports of entry, that we continue to see steady growth and the trends that are coming out of COVID that are likely to stay will emphasize that pace of growth will continue. And then lastly, that we have far more flexibility in terms of building access to multiple modes of transit in both global supply chains and then also from Mexico to domestic markets. So I'll turn it over to Andrea.
I think with that, we are planning on doing some more analysis. We have an opportunity to dig in further to some of the issues that Naomi pointed out. So we have some questions for discussion. If there's POEs that we forgot to consider, maybe there's deeper analysis needed on certain commodities. And we want to incorporate this information into a forecast, a final for this year forecast for Otay Mesa East. And with that concludes our presentation and happy to have a discussion.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, then we'll have a few minutes for additional questions, and then we need to move on to the next presentation this morning. I'm not an economist, so you probably have to believe what I'm saying. It's not on the one hand, the other hand. Anyway, that's a joke. An economist friend, Jim Gerber, makes the point in his new book, and some of you have heard him present on that the flow of goods back and forth across the border does not equal integration. And the US and Mexico, tremendous increase in the flow of goods does not equal integration, because in economic theory, which he goes into in great depths, economic integration should bring economic convergence. And that has absolutely not happened under NAFTA or USMCA. It's not happened in terms of San Diego and Tijuana. So what's going on here, and is it really a great benefit? That's just kind of a general question, I think, that needs to be addressed and thought about. So you really have to talk about, well, how is integration measured? And how does it relate to quality of life, wages, all kinds of other issues like that? So it's complicated and difficult to handle. Now, another related question is, we saw in the case of Laredo, tremendous volume of traffic going through, but what's the local economic impact? Well, it's cartage, it's moving things, it's not creating good jobs, et cetera. And so I think that's the danger of increasing trade. We need to ask the question of what is the effect on the border economy? So my question is, what is the effect of Otay Mesa on the San Diego-Tijuana border economy? And I think a key issue here is what will the impact of Otay Mesa be on North County, San Diego, Vista and Fallbrook, Ramona? Because a lot of leaders from those areas tend to view the border as a big security problem and an immigration problem. They don't understand the economic impact of the border in their communities. And I realize that there are no data where you can just go and look that up, but I think somehow generating reasonable estimates of why Otay Mesa East is important to Carlsbad and Vista and so on, I think would be very helpful at making the full San Diego County understand that the border is important for our well-being, and it's an area of tremendous economic opportunity. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to throw out, but I think, hopefully eventually can be addressed.
They're all important points that we will get there. This is a starting point. I'll say my experience coming onto this project and understanding the role of our ports of entry in the local economy. I tend to start thinking about it from the fact that we have a flow of goods and people across the border, and to understand the competitiveness of investment in another land port of entry is to first understand how does it fit within the right set. And to me, the right set is understanding goods can move into the US through lots of different places, and businesses are going to choose to have them go through the place that does it in the most cost-effective way and in the most timely way, because time matters for some of these goods. And so, that's why we zoomed out and said, okay, how much is a Laredo or an El Paso or a Brownsville really an alternative? Because we're talking about global markets first. That's the largest share of what's coming through here. It's the significance of the land port of entry. Once we kind of secured that, then the next point is to move into really understanding what's the role of our land ports of entry into the local economy. So I would say we're not ignoring that. It's just another stage.
If I might add, I think that's a really valuable observation and point. I'd be interested to see the book you're referring to. And it speaks to, it sort of rhymes with what Mario introduced with, that there's a need to balance the trade, the economic growth with those impacts that we would see locally. So I hope that, that COBRO and other work that SANDAG does in the border region can help to continue to look at the impacts. It's not, even when NAFTA was, we created the North American Development Bank to help address some of those environmental impacts. So being able to find that balance, I think, will be important. I value that point.
I have a quick one. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. Also a comment on what Paul was saying. I unfortunately have not read the book yet, but the way anecdotally we know that like 80% of the employees in Otay Mesa are living in Tijuana, and they're spending a large amount of time waiting. So what you mentioned, Naomi, about people, I think if you can, if you want to incorporate that part, there's so much local economic impact from Otay East, in the sense that it will reduce the time, and maybe the employers will start paying for passes for employees because they really want them there on time. I think it's really significant, the integration and the convergence, because we see the people earning salaries in San Diego and spending the money in Tijuana on the one hand. But my question is, I was scared the other day, one of our members was saying they're expanding and they're even considering moving to Yuma. And I was thinking, with all like the CARB rulings on zero emission, that's creating more expenses on companies, and in general, California, the type of costs related to businesses. Are you looking in the forecast something related, for example, to the CARB rulings? Is that increasing expenses and maybe they're not going to be using in California? I'm just, this particular member, for example, was saying our goods go all across the United States. And the majority was not in California, it was throughout. So they're like, well, why would we not go to Yuma but just asking if that's going to be considered or not.
Jose, you had a, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I mean, this is one of the reasons why is a next step in this study is to really understand the economic development, investment, and transportation infrastructure on the Mexico side, not just the U.S. side, because it is exactly what you're talking about that will influence over a long time horizon where we'll see shifts in terms of goods moving across our border.
Say.
A couple comments and questions. What about the trends on the profile of the goods that are being imported and exported? Usually when I see presentation like this, it's always the number of trucks or the value. But what about the profile? I mean, you show a couple of things, but what are the sectors that are growing the most within that profile? Like in the 80s, there was a lot of the products that came from Mexico or from Tijuana. It was mainly clothes and then shifted to electronics and then like different. But how the profile is changing, and does your study address that? And what are the trends coming forward? And also with the war between, well, the economic war between China and the U.S. and the discussion with semiconductors, does this region have an opportunity to support like semiconductors in San Diego and Tijuana and so?
Yeah, those are good questions. So as part of our forecast, I mean, what I've presented is really just understanding what differentiates us from the other 6 border city pairs. But as we develop the forecast of what would flow through Otay Mesa East, I mean, we are digging into the commodities and those values. I would say from what I recall, I don't want to speak out of turn, these kind of top categories of commodities continue to be significant and growing in significance over time, at least from the FAF forecast. And then what we're thinking about is because we're looking out 25, 30 years, what becomes important is what's the production capacity in both San Diego and Tijuana to accelerate or decelerate those import projections. In terms of semiconductors, from everything that we've read, I mean, as a starting point that we're accounting for almost 70% of what's coming into the U.S. By truck through these ports of entry. To change that would require relocation of manufacturing capacity from the Tijuana area to another part of Mexico. And when you start thinking about relocation of manufacturing capacity, now you're talking about like 10 year out before you start to see those trends because of just, all the process of building the plants. So in our forecast, I don't see dynamics that would dramatically disrupt these trends. I think what we would see is just maybe a very, very subtle slowing. But the material impact of that, we're looking at like 15, 20 years out minimum.
Thanks. Let's just have one more question, and I think we need to move on to the next presentation.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. By the way, great presentation. Congratulations. And I agree with Alejandra. I think we need to see more of the people movement in Cali Baja. We have around anywhere between almost 200,000 people crossing each and every day. In our San Diego region, from San Diego to Tecate, we have around 150,000. And it's just a turnstile of workers, students, and the occasional shopper now. But I think it's important to gain the narrative. And I like how you started your presentation at 40,000 feet on how Otay Mesa is not just a San Diego issue, but it's a national issue. So just a quick comment on that on the workforce.
Very important part and second stage. So, I mean, we know from the ports of entry that the infrastructure, the access across the U.S. for that is different, you know, so the number of bridges across, for example, but it's also going to be dependent on demographic trends on both sides. So it's an entirely different data set to do that analysis, but we haven't lost sight of it.
Well, thank you very much. That was a terrific presentation, and I think it stimulated a lot of thoughts, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again in the not too distant future, but thanks very much for your effort. Well, before we move on to the final presentation, I'd like to welcome Gabriela Munoz from El Colegio de la Frontera Norte, who came in a little bit late, but welcome. We're glad you could make it.
Thank you very much, and I do apologize. I don't know. I think that we need some help to see what is going on with the traffic in Tijuana. You know. But today I ran into two blockages. 2 hours. I do apologize. I tried to come and sleep one previous night before the next meeting.
Great. Okay, our next presentation is on facilities for transporter bicycle use in Tijuana, San Diego. Notes on the recent history of binational cooperation and or lack thereof by Elizabeth Hensley Cheney, who's well known to us, and Daniel Gomez from the Alianza por la Movilidad Activa, and also Tomás Pérez Vargas of the Consejo de Desarrollo de Tijuana. So welcome.
Gracias. Thank you very much. I guess I will be presenting the first part of the presentation, kind of looking at several different histories of, I guess, access for bicycle use in the transporter region, focusing on San Ysidro Port of Entry. The first slide that I have here shows a number of photographs that were recorded by Alfonso Carabello, also of COLEF, in around the time of between 2002 and 2006. Pre-2002, at the San Ysidro Port of Entry, the way to access via bicycle was to integrate with the bus lane. Following 2002, that particular way of crossing was canceled, and a dedicated bike lane was installed from 2002 to 2006. I think that the image that's on the bottom right-hand side of the screen shows that particular facility during that time period, which in 2006 was canceled due to abuse. We move forward a little bit in the next slide, showing what we have, at least at this particular stage, in terms of interaction between civil society and the authority, working both with SANDAG through its Bike to Work Day, and also working with the Instituto Metropolitano de Planeación de Tijuana. And I think we have a representative present online, where we have the first event of Tijuaneando en Bici, an annual event that looks to reactivate the dedicated bicycle facility at the land port of entry. We move forward to 2011, which is when we have the start of the San Ysidro Port of Entry expansion project, which in a certain way puts on hold or impacts the plan to reinstall a dedicated bicycle lane. At that time, we're told that we need to wait until the Port of Entry expansion project is complete to begin discussion anew. Here we have a moment from 2014. I can remember very well meetings with Anthony Kleppe, I'm a representative of the General Services Administration. At this time, through the San Ysidro Chamber of Commerce, there was a lot of advocacy for to have 2 different pedestrian facilities. And from those discussions came the San Ysidro West Pedestrian Facility. At the time, I remember from conversations with Mr. Kleppe, The idea was to include a lane that would be shared between people who arrive with use of a wheelchair and people who are arriving with use of a bicycle. The protocol to operate that lane has never entered into effect. It's never been hammered out. In 2015, I think many people who were part of COBRO for a while may remember, I know that Jose Marquez, you may remember the Imperial County Transportation Commission Pedestrian and Bicycle Access Study, which highlights one of the recommendations that was made through that study was a dedicated bicycle lane at the San Ysidro Port of Entry. We move forward a little bit to 2021, to the start of the current municipal administration in the city of Tijuana. At that time, there was interest on the part of the Secretaría de Movilidad Urbana Sustentable to study a binational bicycle facility. There was work that was advanced. Some things have continued forward, but once the individual who was the head of that particular municipal department was changed, those conversations slowed down quite a bit. Here we have another moment also working with the municipality, in this case, through a civilian council that was put in place by the councilwoman who is the president of the Commission on Mobility and Roadways, through which two specific projects of bicycle infrastructure were given, I guess, a sort of legal base. One of which is bicycle infrastructure on a roadway that is in the Mesa de Otay, passing by two educational institutions and eventually connecting to the industrial area. The second piece of infrastructure, my colleague Tomas is going to talk about in greater depth, links to the San Ysidro Port of Entry, the Ciclovía del Río or Paseo del Río Tijuana. And here we come to Bike Anywhere Day, or the 14th anniversary of Tijuaneando in BC, which took place on the 16th, 17th, and 18th of May of this year. On the 16th, we had two activities starting at 7 in the morning, where we, I guess, kind of mounted the traditional Bike Anywhere pit stop in the Plaza del Sur del Chaparral. I think around 25 different bicycle or non-motorized mobility users passed by the pit stop. We ran out of shirts. One of the things that we noticed this year is that there are a lot of users that are coming on scooters. That seems to be a popular trend. Later in the afternoon on the same day, we held a conversation. The conversation was geared towards people who run businesses or live near the roadway where there's another projected bicycle facility, the Calzada de Tecnológico, to open a discussion about how that piece of infrastructure will eventually look. We continue to work with the community there. On the 17th of May, and this Tomas will speak in greater depth about, the Consejo de Desarrollo de Tijuana has taken a lot of interest, largely through Tomas, in promoting the rehabilitation and extension of a bikeway that goes along the Rio Tijuana. I guess when that particular infrastructure project was inaugurated, it was known as the Ciclovía del Rio. I think the idea is to rebrand it as a sort of shared facility between pedestrians and people who are using bicycles, called the Paseo del Rio Tijuana. This activity brought in a lot of press coverage to kind of show how that project has been developing, and Tomas will talk in greater depth in a moment. So on the 18th of May, we collaborated with a colleague who's interested in promoting businesses that provide discounts or incentives for bicycle users through a project that she's calling Comunidad Bike Friendly. And with that, I'm going to pass the clicker to Tomas, who will speak more about the Paseo del Rio Tijuana.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a nice ride on memory lane from 2002 to 2024. Yeah, this is some infrastructure that exists right now in Tijuana, bike infrastructure, and I'll be talking a little bit more on it. In the CDT, I lead the mobility group for CDT, and this is one of our projects. And I understand the complexity of the mobility and the traffic issues, and it's not an easy problem. But when I started with the CDT, this was a project that really, I believe, it really can impact in the long term, not only in the short term, but in the long term mobility issues. Why? Because here's an aerial image, okay, of that bike lane. That bike lane sits on top of an existing levee. So it's not taking away any automobile or public transportation area, okay? It exists. It was built in 2015, 16, and it also has 4 or 5 pedestrian bridges right now. So about every 700 meters, there's a pedestrian bridge that is being used constantly. There's pedestrian access up to those bridges across the canal, but there's no access to the bike lane. So it's a bike lane that it's pretty much only accessible through the 3 green points that you see at the bottom. Let's see if I can point here. All right, yeah, thank you. And the green points at the end of every bridge that is outlined by a black bar, those ones on green are, somewhat, yes, handicap accessible. So there's a ramp that the handicapped person can access, but all the ones in red are not. They're not even adequate for the bicyclists. If you see the one on the bottom, Misión de la Paz with green, there's a picture on the right side, and that's what they've done, which is a very ingenious and useful device for cyclists to use to go up. It's not expensive at all, and it makes it. But there's only one. Finally, we pushed, and we got the Zoom to get the second one, and you'll see a picture right now. But the idea is to really make all those dots green and have it use it. There's about 5,000, I think this is the term, economic units, I call them business, along that influence area, that if we can get a lot of the traffic or, a lot of the users to know about it, they can go from downtown to the municipality to Plaza Rio. You can start using the bike and hopefully alleviate some of the traffic. And again, this is only 3.2 kilometers of a project that's 12 kilometers long. We initiated this because CONAGUA, which is a federal agency responsible that has the jurisdiction of the canal, okay, since already awarded and approved the project in 2016, we didn't want to, we wanted to rehabilitate that first and see how CONAGUA reacts to then go back and then finish, in a future phase, the other 9. The other 9, you can see it on this slide. I'll show it again, but it was shown on a slide that Elizabeth presented. Let me keep moving here. If you can play the video, just I guess everybody has an idea how this works, but this is what makes it so easy for the bike user to just roll their bike up these stairs, and that makes all the difference in the world. Believe me. I mean, I live in Chula Vista. I work in Tijuana downtown, and yes, I'm a bike guy. I ride my bike. Okay, I do it 2 or 3 times a week. Okay. I take it from Chula Vista to the trolley, go up in the trolley, get down on San Isidro, go across the border, and we'll talk about that part. Cross the border and then ride my bike through Tijuana. It's fun. And yeah, I mean, it has its challenges, but anyway, okay, let's see if this, no. Next one, thank you. That's one of those, the one on CREA that I'm showing there. That stairs, we pushed, they finally got it remodeled. They increased the width twice amount. Imagine trying to get a bicycle and a pedestrian in half that width. So after talking and pushing, let's see if I can do the next one. Okay, they finally heard us and they put the device so they can get. And sure enough, I was away and I got these pictures from some friends. Hey, we got it to use it now. And I think the point is the following. This was on May 17 when we yeah, I know, but it was May 17 when we did that press conference and invited the media and say, hey, it's not perfect. It's maybe, very rundown. We're going to fix it, but at least let's start using something, okay? And then we heard that there was some accessibility by some of the work that has been done. And this is June 3rd. This is the World Day for Bike Ride. Thank you for starting the video. And again, I couldn't attend, I was away, but I was told that about 180 bikes bicycles went along, and you can see how people, yes, it was recreational, it was, a rodada, what we call a rodada, but and you can see there's some lights along the bike ride that bicycles were using, so 180 bikes. So I'm definitely convinced that if we can just, enhance it, okay, make it a little bit more appealing, and yes, there's a stigma about safety, and we can address that later. But I think that if the bike can take over the space a little bit more, safety might also be something could be mitigated. But these are some of the renderings that we're looking at putting for some of the landscaping. CONAGUA has been very clear. They don't want any major fixed structure. They want accessibility to the canal. So that's why we're trying to enhance the side, the actual slope, and improve it and make it in a way that the vehicle driver sees that big, monument out there and says, "Oh, what's part?" Well, that's the Paseo Rio Tijuana. It's a bike ride. You should join it. It's try to focus the attention to that, and that's the effort that we're going to, that we're putting into. Hopefully, we can accomplish the effect. So finally, almost finally here, we're trying to secure funding for the actual on ramps that we need for 3 of those pedestrian bridges, the one in Mexico and Marquez de Leon, that are there on red within the yellow line. And hopefully, once we do that, then we can keep pushing also, to build them and push to enhance some of the stairs. And if we do that, I think we're going to have a nice little, bike lane there, safe, away from traffic, that people can use on a daily basis to go from work and lunch and et cetera. But this is what brought us here, really. And this is like my reflection. I know Elizabeth and Danielle for about 3 or 4 years since I started SANDAG, and I admire their perseverance. And I really believe that projects like this do take a lot of time to really make an impact. Here, and I apologize by the day, that should have been 2002, right? That picture. But it proves the point. We've been very grateful for all the opportunities that COBRO and SANDAG has given us to show and present the work. But if we really want to work on a community, regional community, where that blue line and people can come across, enjoy some of those rodadas and back and forth, we definitely have an issue at the crossing. And I know that, we have a lot of federal agencies and actors that are really complex. I think, Mario, you know what CBP is like, and INAMI and all those agencies. But hopefully we can work on something so we can improve it, because 2002 or 2006 there definitely, shows that's more viable and encouraging for cyclists to use the bike to cross the border, then 2024, literally, that's a picture I took. I have to navigate through that to get my bike through that. Okay. And with that, I just, wanted to thank you for the opportunity and thank Elizabeth for all the hard work. And here's our contacts for any, questions or data that, that you
Thanks
want
very much
that we
for
can follow.
excellent presentation, Tomas and Elizabeth. I think we have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Mario?
Well, it's a comment, but it's also a challenge for all of us. I think the last point you brought is the issue with the last and the first mile. Let it be however you're seeing it, right? Our first mile and the last mile in Mexico or vice versa. And, we need to be consistent or at least acknowledge that CBP has given us the solution and it's now upon us to implement it. They have told us, if you can come and show me that you have a roadway network on both sides of the border that can connect to each other seamless and safe, we will consider. I'm not talking for CBP. I'm just telling you what I was told some years ago. We would consider maybe a bike lane or something like that. So it is upon us to have those conversations, because at least the first mile is not within the city of San Diego. It's not within the state. It's within the port of entry itself. In a little bit in Tijuana, also the last mile will have to be the appropriate governmental agencies. But I think we could eventually, hopefully we can work together on trying to figure out a proposal or something that could be that last mile, first mile connection to whatever each of us are doing on our sides of the border. And then that will give us more solid ground to go and request a more seamless processing for bikes.
Well, thank you very much. That's very, very encouraging. I'll take that as a message so we can keep pushing to get to that last mile and show, and hopefully we can keep working together on, moving in that direction. But that's very encouraging, Mario. Thank you.
Yes, Jose?
Hey, can I just say for San Isidro and Otay Mesa?
Thank you for the presentation. Going back to what Mario was mentioning, there's a couple of things here. Is building that the connection between this facility and the port of entry. What is the city of Tijuana? Do they have a project to, like on local streets, to connect this facility with the port of entry? And also, as you might have heard, the state of Baja California is pursuing a what they call a CBX crossing for pedestrians. I don't know if you have reached out to them. Maybe there's a possibility in the future to integrate a bicycle crossing within that project or that concept with the state of Baja. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Concerning bicycle infrastructure in the city of Tijuana, since 2018, when the city in convenio with an agency called ITRP Mexico published a study, a bicycle study for the city, bicycle mobility study for the city, we've had a concept for a network of bike lanes, a propuesta de red de ciclovías for the city. Since that study was published, nothing has been constructed. That's why we've been trying to push, or at least through the punto de acuerdo on one of the slides that I showed. What we need in the city is infrastructure to make bicycling attractive and safe for people. It's going to be a lot of work to push for the execution of the projects that we have covered by the punto de acuerdo, and we will have to continue pushing. It seems like there's not It's something that's funny because in other parts of the country, there's a lot more progress in terms of non-motorized mobility and looking at the integration of pedestrian and bicycle use as preferred modes in the city. In Tijuana, in part thinking about, there's always a kind of, there are steps, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But we will continue.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We've run out of time. And so I think we need to adjourn in a minute. Our next COBRO meeting is set for September 4th at 10:30 a.m. And hopefully that will facilitate more participation in person from the county and from across the border. We don't have the agenda set for that yet, but I want to devote a good part of that session for discussion among COBRO members about priorities and themes that we feel like we should be working on and emphasizing over the next year. And we will have some informal discussions and communications with COBRO members over the summer so we can start thinking about this so that when we get together, we can have a productive interchange. But I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I'd particularly like to thank our new CEO of SANDAG for coming and participating so actively, and we hope to see you again. So thank you very much, everyone.